Chapter 3. At first glance, the Daleks of Conquest Army Zero were like any other Daleks, but as Snidge spent more time around them, he began to notice disturbing traits. These Daleks were far more individualistic than any Dalek Snidge had ever encountered. They were also very erratic and would not comply with basic protocol. A few of them had even started to call him New Guy. Were they that damaged that they couldn't comprehend basic ideas like rank? Snidge found the General in the weapons testing chamber. He was warned by a technician to keep behind the line on the chamber floor. Ryuk stood with his sword drawn. At the other end of the room stood 3 Daleks. Ryuk's stance shifted as the 3 Daleks charged towards him, one taking flight and the other 2 flanked either side of him. Ryuk hit the one on the left with a horn blast. It screamed and spun into the corner. The one up high fired at Ryuk, who blocked the blast with his sword, but the energy forced it from his hand. Another quick blast from his horn and the Dalek was on the ground. The Dalek on the right was now behind Ryuk and pressed his gun against the General's back.
"Submit, General,"
he declared. Ryuk rolled his eyes as his tail grabbed the Dalek's gun.
"What?"
the Dalek exclaimed, as Ryuk spun around and pushed the Dalek against the wall with an unseen force. Snidge had read reports about the General's telekinetic abilities, but didn't expect it to be this effective in combat. The battle ceased and the 3 Daleks returned to Ryuk's side. "Good. You are improving, but keep in mind, you have to work as a unit. Each has to know exactly where the other is without looking. I caught a few instances where you were checking each other's position," Ryuk said as he examined each Dalek.
"We will do better next time, General,"
the End Dalek said. Ryuk gave them one last look and nodded. "Make sure you do. Report to medical and engineering before you return to your duties." The 3 Daleks nodded their eye stalks and left the chamber. Ryuk stretched out his hand and his sword flew to it. He spotted Snidge waiting for him and walked towards him, returning the sword to his scabbard as he did. "Snidge, I trust you are finding your way around. Lex informed me you declined a tour." Snidge's eye focused on the General's horn.
"Yes, General. I prefer to see a base operating naturally. If word got out a tour was underway, I would not see things working as they normally would."
Ryuk snorted. "I see. Is there something I can help you with?"
"I wish to contact Skaro Control to inform them of my initial findings, but have been denied access to that section."
"That section is off limits. We are relaying the main power cables. The sections we initially installed when tested were found to have faults." Snidge took this chance to see how far the General could be pushed.
"Maybe if you used actual Daleks, the fault would have been detected before the cables were installed."
The room went silent and you could hear a pin drop, as all eye stalks were on Snidge, who suddenly felt very uncomfortable, but Ryuk just laughed. "Yes, we should have, but those were installed by a team of engineers from Skaro who brought the reactor." Snidge cursed himself silently. "But you are in luck. The cables are in their final stages, and we will be firing up the reactor later today," Ryuk added. "Now, if that is all, I have duties to perform." And with that, Ryuk turned and exited the room. Snidge stood silently in the chamber for a few minutes. What on Skaro is going on here? How could the Emperor permit this thing to be a general, surrounded by those lesser things pretending to be Daleks? Senior Engineer Trip and his aide Mute were inspecting the newly laid cables. Construction of the base had fallen behind schedule, and though the General had not expressed any concern over it, Trip knew the success of Conquest Army Zero relied on them being able to perform as well as any of the standard Conquest armies.
"This section meets required safety standards. The panels can be secured in position,"
Trip stated. Mute noted down their progress on a data slate as a group of engineers moved up behind them with floor panels to cover the exposed cable. Trip came from the 4th Conquest Army. Unlike most of the Zero Daleks, Trip was allowed to function in the army, but had considerable difficulties, and was scheduled to be decommissioned. But before he left with Ryuk, Trip asked if he could bring another Dalek with him. This was the Dalek that would be known as Mute, who was fully functional except for his inability to speak. Enabling Mute to communicate was a simple modification. Instead of audio messages, a neural interface allowed Mute to simply think what he wanted to say, and that would be sent as a text message to other Dalek or Daleks. Trip had spent several duty shifts in the medical section while it was being overhauled. During that time, he and Mute developed a language and became friends. Trip would talk about the subject he knew best, engineering. Over time, he taught Mute the basics of engineering, and Mute quickly picked it up and even started suggesting changes to the way things were done. Some worked out, others not so much, but this was due to the resistance by other engineers, They were of the minds that what would a defective Dalek know of engineering that they already didn't? Ryuk took both of them with him, and they quickly became prominent members of his engineering team. Watching the final panel being secured, Trip activated his internal communications.
Engineer Trip to Control. Final checks complete. You are clear to proceed with reactor activation.
In the control room, the technician reported to Ryuk, who was overseeing operations, alongside Lex and Snidge.
Engineering teams report final checks complete.
Ryuk stepped forward and took a breath. Very well. Order all non-essential personnel away from main line sections. Leave the base if they wish, and proceed with reactor warm-up. The techs immediately busied themselves at the controls. A few moments later, all was ready. Begin primary reactor ignition. Level off at 5% and report, Ryuk ordered. Snidge moved to his side.
General, I have seen many reactor activations. This level of caution is not necessary.
Ryuk didn't look at Snidge. Normally, I would agree, but this type of reactor is new, using a yet untested control system and reaction chamber. It has been tested on a small scale, but not on a base as large as this one. Snidge didn't reply, and simply moved back to his place. Lex moved to his side.
Openly question the General's orders again, and you will be dismissed from this control room. Understood?
Snidge stared at Lex. So, the Dalek had some backbone, did it?
I understand, Sub-Commander.
A low thud could be heard as the reactor was brought online. Over the next hour, the reactor was brought up to operational levels, and the external generators were disconnected. Now the base was a living thing, able to support itself and the Daleks living within it. Continue to monitor reactor levels, report any fluctuations no matter how small, Ryuk ordered as he turned to leave the control room.
General, where are you going?
Snidge questioned. Again, Ryuk didn't look at him. For a flight. Is that alright with you, Senior Supervisor? Snidge didn't get a chance to answer as the door closed behind Ryuk.